a pleasure to be here and represent IUPAC at this really important juncture in the development of our standard for spectroscopic data description and management, IUPAC project 2019-031-1024. For those of you who don't know about this project, our objective is to apply fair data principles to spectroscopic data in the field of chemistry. That is our scope. We're primarily working with small molecules right now, not huge data sets, no gigabytes, well, gigabytes maybe, but no petabytes or terabytes here generally. Project timeline started in March of 2020. We got derailed pretty fast by COVID, and most of us are academics. It's a volunteer organization, so we had a little slow start, but we had a lot of talks about the developing a vision for this and developing partnerships and developing some our own, what we call our fair spec principles. One of the things that I'll mention here is that we also helped the American Chemical Society shared with us a pilot study where they asked authors if they would please submit data sets with synthesis papers in a couple of journals. And they were able to get a number of authors who are willing to do that. And we got to see the data and analyze it. And I won't have a lot of time to share that with you today, but please ask me about that if you're interested. It's now February 2022, and we're ready to work with partners on the details of the recommendations. We think we've got the basic framework laid out, and I'll show you that the way we're operating this, this is not really going to come, the details are not going to come from IUPAC. The details are going to come from the people who want to use this. So I really encourage you, if you have an interest in NMR or Raman spectroscopy or mass spec or other spectroscopies relating to chemistry, please contact us and let us work with you. We would really love to have that input. We need to have that input. We aren't experts on all of these fields by any means. We hope that we can have something by June of this year, this summer, work on rolling out a preliminary recommendation for comment and testing. And during the fall and winter of this coming year, toward the end, finalize our recommendations. And our project is funded through December of 2023, so that gives us plenty of time to iterate and come up with something that's really what people need. We have submitted for publication our first paper on this. It's a paper on our guiding principles primarily. And just as there are the principles of fair data, we have gone ahead and applied those specifically to spectroscopy and chemistry and given them some context. And I just take out the 5 main characteristic areas of these 20. Each one of these has 4 points under it in the actual document, but many of these we've heard this today already, and it just really feels perfect in my mind to be sitting here talking about this with this group, because I can see now how much interaction and how much interface we actually have with these other groups. The first thing that we've already learned today, fair management of data just has to be an ongoing concern. It can't be something that somebody wakes up a day before they have to submit their final paper and say, oh, maybe I should do something about my fair data. And it's just not going to be that way. We're developing a standard that can ride through the entire process well beyond publication. Context is important. This is something that I think we heard as well here to a certain extent, that particularly in the area of synthesis, for example, in chemistry, when you have an isolated spectrum, it's okay, that's nice. But really what you're seeing there is a compound was made and then another compound was made, and from that another compound. There's a real connection between spectra. And I would think for artificial intelligence particularly, that connection could be a critical connection to understanding what's going on in the spectra. And another point, major point that we have here is that this is all going to require curation. I think we heard that as well already this morning as well. And by curation, we mean both distributed human curation, as in getting the data in, and we heard about getting the data checked but as much of this curation as possible, we want to be automated. We've done a lot of thinking about how we want to get the metadata standardized and registered so that it can actually be accessed automatically using standardized search technology that's out there on the web. And one last point here is that we really need this to be modular and extensible and flexible. Whatever we do here with this standard, it's going to be a start. It's going to be something that is going to have to evolve over time and adjust to new technologies. And we think we have that as well. So here are the actual 20 points. I'm not going to go through these, but just to show you that they are something to read. Also in this paper is a glossary of about 30 terms that we are using. Most of them are from RDA, but some of them we've invented ourselves. And I'll be using some of this terminology. For example, the difference between a digital aggregation and a collection, what a digital data representation is, something we're calling a finding aid, not a word we hear a lot in this community, but it's big in the area of digital archiving in general. And what we mean by a data collection, an IUPAC fair spec data collection. That's really what we're after here. So the basic idea, one of the main principles that we have developed is the idea of respecting multiple representations. By this, I mean, for example, if you have a spectrum, you have the raw FID coming from the vendor, that's obviously valuable. You also have transformed spectra, you might have zeroed in, zoomed in spectral images. There's all sorts of data items that could be very important and to somebody. And so we want to respect that. We want to be able to take in any kind of data, whatever that representation is, and be able to know what we're looking at. And the other thing that is very, very important here in terms of this, at least a large chunk, maybe our 80% of our sort of data has to do with the fact that in this business, we generally can relate a structure, a chemical structure, a chemical identifier to a spectral item. And so structures themselves can have different representations, and we want to respect that as well. So the recommendation will have certain aspects of preference, but it will not be restrictive in that sense. Finally, we really want to respect the idea that data is part of a collection. And to make a digital collection, what we're saying is that we're taking this data set of how many files there might be, and we're creating what we're calling a digital finding aid that can give a high level understanding of what's in the data, just what we were just hearing about, I think, in the previous talk. And basically the standard allows for repackaging or extraction, another thing we heard about earlier today several times, that in the context, in our language, what we're saying is that, say there's a publication and someone has deposited their data set. We're not going to call that a collection yet. We're going to call that an aggregation. We're just going to say that is a whole bunch of files, and hopefully we can make something out of it. The job is to do some sort of a metadata extraction and standardization of that data set, possibly creating new representations. For example, JCamp-DX standardized files out of Brooker data sets, for example. Creating new objects, creating representations, creating this indexing of them, and then packaging that in what we call a fair data collection, and serializing the objects in terms of metadata into the finding aid. Now, the interesting thing here is that it allows for distributed data storage. So while we might have a certain amount of specialized archives that would receive the finding aid, that doesn't mean at all that the actual data itself has to be at that place. So as long as the finding aid is properly made and maintained and the data are maintained, we could have a highly distributed system here that allows for institutional database, mixes of Zenodo and specialized databases, all being referred to with more than one or more data sets. Also, I think this is one of the most important things that I'm very excited about in terms of the near future is the development of ELNs that can basically produce this publication data set and we would be having this standard developed in conjunction with those ELNs so that all along the way, from the first day that the research data is produced by the spectrometer, there is this finding aid that's following it along the way from sample to structure to publication and then beyond that can continually give us a standardized way of looking at the data. And of course, what that allows is for us to have the alternative definition of FAIR, which I just love, which is fully artificial intelligence ready. Because now what we can do is have this finding aid being the access point for DataCite and persistent identifiers, as well as artificial intelligence machine algorithms for actually finding and discovering the data in the first place. Okay, so it's pretty simple system. I just want to go over very briefly, just give you a peek at what this looks like. It's a set of concatenated terms, spectroscopic data properties, data type representations, structure properties, structure representations, sample properties, analysis properties, which we have not started on. And it's in conjunction of this, we've actually produced a prototype extractor from the data sets that came from the American Chemical Society study and built a series of JSON-based finding aids, which catalog and display the contents of the files in a way that is readable and understandable. And so, for example, here's a data set that actually had some little images that were associated with it. And I think this may be one of the ones that came actually from an MNOVA file. And I think I'm gonna do this in 15 minutes here, Matthew. So that's basically it. And we have a demo site. I'm more than happy to talk with anybody about this. I'm eager to share this and get interest in general or specific interest. So there's my email there, hansonr@stolif.edu, and this is my project team. It's been a great ride, and I certainly hope that there will be lots of people here who might be interested in talking with us about this.